Welcome back to FastGadgets. Today we're going to talk about Linux in the news, and this is Saturday, May 20th. First on our list, Microsoft has decided they will block Linux on Windows 10s. So if you are a big proponent of Windows 10s and you thought you were going to enjoy Linux, this means that you will not be able to use Linux from the Windows Store, nor will you be able to add it as you normally would in the settings. So unfortunately, there will be no Linux available for Windows 10s. According to Microsoft, Windows 10s does not run command line applications, the Windows console, CMD, PowerShell, Linux or Bash, WSL instances, any command line applications, and espouses a safe environment that protects Windows 10s from malicious or misbehaving software. And this came from Rich Turner, Senior Product Manager at Microsoft. What's interesting about this, in my opinion, is all the tools they're talking about, to the best of my knowledge, do not really cause much of a problem as far as security vulnerabilities. If you think back, how many times have you heard an malware or hostageware using PowerShell or any of these other tools, the Linux built-in tools that you can install on Windows 10? So I am a little bit surprised that they're going to do that. What it does indicate, though, is that there will be applications on the Windows 10 store that you simply will not be able to install. Now, of course, right now they're talking about all the command line applications and other power tools that might actually be useful for somebody. Say you bought a computer and you had Windows 10s and you wanted to learn about the Linux command line. You will not be able to do that. So I would expect to see other tools in the future as well that unfortunately may be cut out. And this next article is actually a tweet from one of the developers over at Conspiracy Labs, and it indicates that WannaCry infections were actually affecting Windows 7 x64 exponentially more than any other distribution. So if we look at Kaspersky's statistics, they're saying that Windows 7 infections was up in 60%, where Windows 7 was 31%, and then Home was 3%, and Windows 7 Home was 2.64%. Then we have Server 2008 here and here at about 1.5%, and way down here is Windows 10 x64 edition at 0.03%. So Windows 10 was not really the big issue, at least according to Kaspersky Labs statistics. The WannaCry infection was actually pivotal in infecting Windows 7 computers, which are still the majority of Windows installations. So many people have not yet gone to Windows 10, and here we can see also that Windows 8, let's see, is Windows 8 even listed here? No. Nope, Windows 8 is not even listed on here, so it must have been even less. So the rule here is, if you're running Windows 7, make sure you do install any updates that Microsoft decides to make available that would take care of WannaCry, or use a third-party tool to do the same. Now, there is now an update for Windows XP that came from Microsoft, so there's a patch you could apply, and that in itself is a controversy. Some are saying that Windows XP should have been left to die, and by patching it, Microsoft is setting a precedent saying that it's still significant. I actually disagree with that position. My feelings on the matter are that this was something that Microsoft did to show that they would support Windows users no matter what platform they were on, in order to ensure that they had a safe system. Although you're not getting any other patches on Windows XP for any other viruses or malware, so the usefulness is very limited. And next, talking again about WannaCry or WannaCrypt or WannaCryptor, does make an easy case for Linux, and this is by Jack Wallen on Tech Republic. Now, many people are saying, why would we consider switching over to Linux just because of some malware, some ransomware that held our computer hostage? I guess it all depends on how important the documents are on your computer and whether or not you have a backup and the backup is recent and you're able to retrieve your lost data. Or if you want to consider paying some Bitcoin, $300 worth of Bitcoin. But the author goes on to say, let's consider how nasty, how dangerous this particular encryption malware was. One, it's able to spread itself. It exploits a known vulnerability in Windows. And again, it's using the SMB protocol. This is absolutely the most embarrassing thing for Microsoft. They're saying that their operating systems are secure, yet here we are again dealing with exploits using SMB. Now, granted, the Windows 10 operating system was not really affected that much, which is a good sign for Microsoft that they are taking their newer software very seriously. So kudos to Microsoft on that regard. The other scary thing, and I really don't think what operating system you're on, there's not a lot that can be done about it, but we have a company, a third-party company that worked with the NSA to produce the WannaCrypt delivery mechanism. It wasn't the payload itself, but the delivery mechanism. So the NSA itself has a vested interest in getting into your computers, and that right there is a scary fact. Computers in 150 countries were infected, and it did cause problems with FedEx, major companies, Renault, Telefonica, and other companies, even hospitals. So what's the big issue with deciding to go to Linux, and is it worth doing? The author goes on to say, I can already hear the tired arguments. The primary issue is software. I will counter that argument by saying this. Most software has migrated to either software as a service or the cloud. The majority of work people do is via a web browser. Chrome, Firefox, Edge, Safari, with few exceptions, SaaS doesn't really care. With that in mind, why would you want your employees and staff using a vulnerable system? And he goes on to equate and compare a poorly designed car that could cause a catastrophic failure to a quality car, and would you send your employees out in a car that has known problems? Well, I could see his point here, and I am a proponent for Linux, but I think it would be a very difficult uphill battle. Personally, I don't think the issue is software, although there are many products that still professional products that still are not available in Linux, and I think that on a professional standpoint, such as video editing, photography, that users really rely on, and they're not likely to switch if they can't get their Adobe products, for example, in Linux. So if Adobe Premiere and other Adobe related products would run in Linux, it might go a long way to switch. However, as you can imagine, if the percentage of Linux users on the desktop went up, so would the amount of attacks against the operating system. But the author makes a good point. If you get a chance, check it out. Next, net neutrality is going down in flames as the FCC votes to kill Title II rules. Now, this isn't directly Linux related, but it is affecting Linux issues, and the case here is if we decide to go ahead and change our ISPs from their Title II common carrier, we have an issue where some content can be sidelined and considered less important than other content. So some of the tools that we use, some of the sites that we visit to get the software that we get in the open source community, or any community really, will be impacted by this change. The notice of proposed rulemaking proposes eliminating the Title II classification and seeks comment on what, if anything, should replace the current net neutrality rules. Chairman Ajit Pai is making no promises about reinstating the 2-year-old net neutrality rules that forbid ISPs from blocking or throttling lawful internet content, or prioritizing content in exchange for payment. Pai's proposal argues that throttling websites and applications might somehow help internet users. So that's my key problem. If you are an internet service provider and you want to accept payment in exchange for increased speed, I do have a problem with that. Now, with the whole net neutrality issue, I actually toe the line. I'm kind of riding on the fence on this one, and here's why. If you are an internet service provider that has used taxpayer money to roll out your network, in the case of AT&T, I would think that they would be definitely a Title II classified network and should stay that way. On the other hand, if you are a network like Comcast and you're a privately owned company and you paid every penny to roll out your own fiber links and your own cable everywhere, in that case, I would say you are in control of your own network. It's fully funded and fully owned by you. The only stipulation there where I would say I could see keeping Comcast as a Title II classified network is because, well, internet provider I should say, is because they did have service agreements with entire counties, entire sections of states where they are the exclusive provider of televised content, not internet necessarily, but they did get an in and have a situation where they had no competition, at least from the closed circuit television content that they've been providing. And in some ways that hurt the taxpayers. So in my opinion there, that would be an impetus for them to maintain their Title II classification. But they really did pay to roll out their entire network. Now, when you have guaranteed income, case in point, when you have an interlocal agreement with say the county you live in, where only they can provide televised services, closed circuit cable services, it's easy to justify rolling out your own network because you know without a doubt that you will be the dominant service, the only service, and you know that people are going to take service from you and you're not going to be competing with anybody else. So that non-competition contract basically ensured that you were going to make money. If they had had to compete with other companies, would they have been so keen on rolling out their cable and coaxial, or not coaxial, the cable and their fiber links as much as they did? So they put in an extensive fiber backbone. Tough to say. I guess if it comes right down to it, I'm not really on the fence. I think net neutrality is important, and I would hate to not be able to go to some of the websites or have reduced performance, possibly even to the extent where others like Netflix that are paying for service actually end up using so much of the pipe that you can't even get to some of the services and the sites that you want to get to. And that would be scary indeed, especially some of the free and open source sites that right now with net neutrality we're able to go to. We don't have to worry too much about the speed it loads, but I do believe we're going to see a difference. Next, and again, this isn't quite a Linux thing, but I thought it was very interesting anyway. ReactOS 0.4.5 was released. I did check out a previous version of ReactOS, and personally I wasn't very impressed. Now, the thing I do like about it is definitely an open source operating system, and it is trying so hard to emulate the Windows 32 and 64-bit layers so that you can run natively Windows apps, kind of like using Wine, really, but you don't have to use Wine. The whole operating system is Windows supported, so any applications you have that are Windows or Microsoft you could run in ReactOS. But I tried to run a couple and I really wasn't very impressed. But this latest update 0.4.5 says that it goes beyond the usual range of bug fixes and syncs with external dependencies, and a fair amount of effort has gone into the graphical subsystem. And they have received some funding which let them take out quirks in the theme system that's a part of ReactOS, as well as getting Microsoft Office 2010 to work under ReactOS, which was the #1 Office product that was requested, the most voted application, which should tell Microsoft quite a bit. A lot of people still like Microsoft Office 2010. They're not really going to 2013 or 2016, aka Office 365, which, you know, ironically, you still have to download anyway and install the packages. So most people still like 2010, which was the last so-called standalone Office version, although 2013 and 2016 really are standalone as well. They just have some cloud elements in Office 365 that you can use. They also have a custom Samba package that has been updated, which you can try out as well. On top of all that, there's been some major fixes in the kernel and drivers that should lead to stability improvements on real hardware and on long-running machines. So that's pretty exciting, and looking at the theming here in this image, it does look like it's come a long way. So it might be time to check out the latest ReactOS. And let's end on a good note. Debian 8.8 has been released, so if you are a Debian 8 user, the new update comes with over 150 security fixes. So if you are running Debian 8.8, you actually don't have to throw your media away or go out and buy new media. You can do an update from debian.security.org and get all or most of the updates. And they mention the update does not constitute a new version of Debian 8, but only updates some of the packages included. There's no need to throw away your old Jesse CDs or DVDs, but only to do an update via the Debian mirror after an installation, and that will update any out-of-date packages. You can point the apt package tool to either the FTP or HTTP mirror and get an update. If you need a listing, you can go to debian.org/mirror/list to get a list of mirrors, and then included is a list of bug fixes, and there are quite a few here. So again, if you're on Debian 8, this is definitely a very important fix. It's more than bug fixes, it's actually security updates as well. I am definitely a big proponent of Debian. I personally don't use it. I'm on Fedora, but I would be using Debian instead of Ubuntu if I were using a Debian distribution. So my distribution of choice would definitely be Debian. I've experimented with it quite a lot. It's extremely stable, and you know it's fully open source. It doesn't have any of the questionable packages that are sometimes added by Ubuntu, and I'm not saying there's a lot of them, but they do have a different mission. They've always had, basically. Their mission was to make money, and it's completely understanding. Ubuntu has really brought at least the recognition of Linux distributions really far, which is a good thing. I always would err on caution and install a fully open source distribution, and if I wasn't on Fedora, I most likely would be on Debian. I hope you enjoyed the video, and thank you again for watching. I'll try to do a Linux in the news every week because there has been quite a bit, so I'm going to try and keep it up every weekend. Hopefully I can release a Linux in the news. If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing and sharing. If you really enjoyed the video, if you could, throw me $1 a month for a cup of coffee on patreon.com/FastGadgets. I always appreciate any type of support you give, even if it's a comment, even if it's constructive. I'm good with that, and it helps me refine the product and make it better for you. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time on Fast Gadgets.